Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Brazil once again. And as you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of the Brazilian craft beers. And it's really nice to see them making their way up here to Europe. If you are interested to try some for yourself, I do recommend that you visit beerdome.nl. They deliver all across the European Union and they're always restocking their Brazilian stuff. And they've got a great selection of things otherwise as well. So do make sure you check them out. But for this review, we are going to introduce another new brewery to the channel. These guys seem very interesting. They've had very good write-ups actually in recent times. And from their assortment, I would say that this is a beer that is going to be right up my street actually. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us, particularly because this brewery is a little bit different from the other Brazilian ones we've had in the past. So hopefully this is another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Paraisópolis, and I will apologise in advance for any bad Portuguese pronunciations. It's going to happen during this video, a language that I am not familiar with at all. But yeah, we're going to go to Paraisópolis in the southern part of the state of Minas Gerais, a bit to the kind of northeast of Sao Paulo, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Cervejaria Zalaz. So this particular beer is called Fumaça. It comes in at 6.6% ABV, and this one is a Saison with home smoked malt added into it. So this should be quite interesting, and this one comes from their Spontaneous series from what I understand, and we'll talk a little bit about the different series of beers that these guys have later on in the video. But yeah, a 6.6% farmhouse Saison with smoked malt in it. This should be very nice. As you know, if you've watched the channel before, my whole love of craft beer began with the Bamberg Rauch beers from Germany. So yeah, to try what I think is my first Brazilian smoked beer should be really quite interesting. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website and the link to my future reviews that I'll do from Cervejaria Zalaz. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. It's always great to get the support from you guys, and it's hugely, hugely appreciated. The whole channel has a geography-based tagging system, and you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find this one in the Brazilian playlist, and we will be expanding that over the next little while. There are a few other big beast Brazilian beers that I have sitting in my cellar that will be appearing over the next wee while. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at my Cervejaria Zalaz brewery notes. So, the Zalaz company, if we talk about the greater organisation, it's actually a farm company based in Paraisópolis in Fazenda Teresina, in the Mantiqueira mountain range in the southeastern part of Minas Gerais in Brazil. And like I said earlier, this is a little bit to the northeast of the cities of Campinas and Sao Paulo. But the company is based on a farm that has been in the same family since 1915, but the Zalaz company was founded a lot more recently back in 2017. But the company is in the third generation of the family, and the founder of the Zalaz brand is Fabricio Almeida, who has a background in logistics. But it was his grandfather who originally purchased the land back in 1915, and the farm actually started as a pig farm, but gradually over time, different, products and things like that, different produce was added to the property. But in the early 2000s, the farm won an award for the best coffee in Brazil, and it was this that really changed the focus and prompted them to get their certified organic status. So in around 2010, Fabricio became interested in craft beers, having mainly been a spirits drinker before, and he started experimenting a little bit with home brewing. But apparently he destroyed his apartment the first time he tried to brew beer, and he started brewing at his parents' place instead after this, which he likes to joke about. So he said he destroyed his own house, now he's going to do it at his parents' place so he doesn't destroy his own house. But basically, he started the Zalaz brand, or the Zalaz company, whatever we're going to call it, as an extension of the already established coffee business on the farm. He wanted to just expand this and add more things to it. But today, the Zalaz farm produces coffee beans in small batches, and they have their own roasting methods and blends as well that they've developed. The brewery and distillery that they have both use ingredients that are cultivated on the farm, and so they produce a number of different seasonal distillates and beers. They do cachaça, which is it's almost like a Brazilian rum actually. It's a sort of sugarcane based thing from what I understand, but it is distinct from, you know, Caribbean rum and things like this, something that I do need to try actually. But they also have an on-site restaurant which creates dishes using the farm's produce, which includes their chicken, pigs and cattle and the various different things that they grow. The main philosophy of the company though is to bring the consumer closer to the farm and their produce, and vice versa. And apparently this was the idea behind them using the name Zalaz, which has a palindrome obviously, Z-A-L-A-Z, same letters back as forward. That was the main idea. They wanted to basically have this reciprocal relationship with their customers, which is great. But like I said, they brew spirits, they distill spirits, and they brew beer. They do cachaça, I think they do gin, and there was something else mentioned as well, but they've got 3 different series of beers when it comes to the brewery. So number 1 is Ibria, which are fermented in the steel vessels and then barrel aged in the different barrels using the house yeast strains. There's the Mantique range, which use the same yeast as the Ibria, but these are not barrel matured, so these are the younger wild ales, I guess we could say. And then they also have the Spontaneous series, of which this beer is a member, and these are fermented directly in the barrel without being put in the steel vessels. So yeah, some really interesting beers from these guys, and these, I really don't know if you're watching from Brazil, let me know, but this is certainly the first sort of farmhouse brewery that I have encountered from Brazil, and I'm sure there will be others pop up over time if there aren't some other ones already there. But these guys have won numerous awards for their beers and their produce, and this is definitely somewhere that I would love to go and visit when I eventually do make it to Brazil. Brazil is definitely on my list. But as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 145 different beers. I think the only other thing I've maybe not mentioned is that they do produce some soft drinks as well, actually, which again use some of the produce from the Zalaz farm. So yeah, again, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on their social media to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. I will point out that both of those are in Portuguese, so you know you might need to use Google Translate for that, but it does work. But yeah, you can, if you want to learn more about the different beers, check out the Untappd page, and I'm sure we'll add more reviews to the channel from these guys over the next little while. But yeah, let's get on and have a look at the beer itself. So there is a little bit of a blurb on the side here, and if you are a Portuguese speaker, I'm sure you'll know what this means, but I did look at the Untappd page and it was the same thing. So basically, this just tells you a little bit about the beer itself. So like I said, it's 6.6% Saison, and this bit on the side here is telling you essentially that this beer is a farmhouse Saison, and they've got some malt in this that they have smoked themselves, which is pretty interesting, and it uses one of their house yeast strains too. So yeah, this is the Fumaça, which I think in Portuguese does just mean smoked. You know, fuma is, yeah, from the Spanish that I know, yeah, I think fumar is to smoke. So yeah, I think the name of this one is literally just like smoke or smoked, some context of that. This is part of the Spontaneous series, which, as we mentioned, is fermented directly in the wooden barrels, and yeah, it contains their own smoked malt. So yeah, let's have a wee look at this beer and see how we get on. So this one, as you can see, it's a 375 milliliter bottle. This one, I actually can't remember what I paid for this, but yeah, it should be quite nice. Plain gold top bottle, plain gold top on this one. Let's just get it out and see how we get on. I'm really, really curious to try this. I think this could well be the first smoked Saison that I've ever had, actually. So, yeah. Interesting bottle top of this one. I've seen these once or twice before, but you can see we've got a nice little bit of smoke coming out of the top of that there, a nice little bit of CO2. But yeah, that was a wee bit difficult to get out, actually. So let's put this beer out and into the glass. Now I'm going to say straight away, surprised that this one doesn't have a little bit more of a darker colour, considering that it contains their own smoke malt. We've got most of the sediment out and into the glass as well from what I can see. But it looks lovely, actually. It looks very, very nice. So, before the head on this one disappears, we've got a very nice, we've got a nice little 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. Yeah, and that is just fading away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer, but you can see there is a sort of slightly thicker foamy ring around the edge of the glass. If I bring the glass up to the camera there, you can see the extent of the bubbles, which is very nice. If the camera will focus on it, there you go. But it looks very, very good, this one. So yeah, in terms of colour, if we shine the natural light through this, it's actually a very kind of bright yellow. And like I said, I'm quite surprised about the colour of this one, considering that some of the malt is smoked in this one. So yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head, which incidentally has just faded away. But yeah, a good little bit of haze in this one. I'm not sure if this beer contains a little bit of oat or something like that, but yeah, certainly the level of haze that you're getting on this one will be down to the yeast and the wheat to a degree as well. But colour-wise, it's a lovely, very kind of bright yellow. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. The length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect that too. But yeah, it does go together very, very nicely, this one, in terms of its appearance. But yeah, it does look, I wouldn't have expected a smoked Saison to be quite as light as this. I would have expected it to be a wee bit darker, to be honest with you. But yeah, I don't think we need to say much more about the appearance of this one. I think we should take a wee look at the aroma and see what we have. Oh, yeah. Now that is really quite interesting. First impression of this beer is you've actually got a little bit of a kind of fight going on between, you have a little bit of a fight going on between the smoky side of the beer and also the the kind of sour side of it as well. So it's obviously, it really has a little bit of that farmhousey, funky, sour type of thing going on. But yeah, you can smell the smoked malt coming out of this right away. But I love how this goes together. Absolutely. Yeah, aroma wise, I think this is very, very nice. Yeah, where do we start with this then? Yeah, so backbone of the beer, you absolutely get some of that nice kind of smooth sort of oaky woody note out of it, and I do smell little hints of vanilla. Yeah, you've got that smooth oaky woody note, you definitely have a little bit of vanilla in there, but then you've got the bread to this one. And the smokiness to the malt is quite interesting actually, because that all blends in with the kind of white bready character that this beer has, and of course that is one of the characteristics of the Saison. You're going to get a bit of white bread from the barley malt, a slightly more dense white bread from the wheat, but you can smell the smoky side of this beer drinking in, sort of merging in with this one. Yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really, really nice. Yeah, so the smoky side of the beer, you can smell a little bit of an almost ashiness to it, but at the same time it has a wee bit of it really does have a little bit of an almost slightly meaty kind of quality to it. We've often compared, on the channel, I've often compared, German Rauch malts, with the beech logs that are burned, to the Scottish kind of peaty character. But you do get a little touch of the kind of grassiness to the smoky note in this beer as well. So I'd be curious to know about the smoking method that they've used. Have they used, what kind of wood have they used for this to burn? Yeah, it would be really interesting to know. It would be really interesting to know how that's been done. But yeah, you can smell the smokiness is kind of embedded in the bready character of the beer. There's a bit of ashiness in there, a bit of meatiness, and you do have a little bit of that kind of almost peaty, grassy character to it. So I really like how that goes together. Yeah. Aroma wise, it is really nice. So on top of that, there are little hints of a slightly butter candy-ish, butterscotchy sort of thing, but I'm not sure if that's just one of the kind of inherent characteristics of the malt. But yeah, the wood, you've got the wood, you've got a little bit of the, you get a bit of the bread crust, you can smell the dense white bread, the more wheaty note in there as well. You've got all that smoky character just packed in, and then you've got a little touch of kind of butterscotchy, butter candy character sitting on top of it. But yeah, you definitely have some Jacob's cream crackery notes coming out of this too. At the back of the nose, you can get some of the kind of more farmhousey, yeasty characters as well. You've certainly got a little bit of that more woody, that kind of woody, more airy, bready character. There are little bits of, yes, a more woody, airy sort of thing. But yeah, it's quite, this beer, the smoke actually does kind of dominate the aroma a little bit, but you can smell on top of the smokiness, this beer does have a little bit of a sour wild ale characteristic. So yeah, that kind of makes it more interesting as well. But I don't know if there's really much more to say about the aroma of the malty and yeasty side of this beer. On the hoppy side of things, you get a little bit of that. There's a little tiny touch of earthy and herbal character in there. Maybe a little hint of floral, but for me, the green component really leans toward a more grassy sort of thing. It really leans toward that more kind of grassy end of the spectrum. Yeah, I like how that goes together. Um, I think other than that, I'm trying to think if there's more. I'd be curious to know the hops. Brazil does, of course, grow its own hops these days, but we've not really seen those in Europe that much yet. Um, but yeah, a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, some nice floral notes, and a wee bit of zesty, grassy character. Um, yeah, that goes together nicely. The fruity side of things, you do have this kind of sharper, almost lemony citrus at the front of the nose. Behind that, there's a bit of fresh green apple, and yeah, there are wee bit elements of kind of peary and sultana type esters in there too. It's it's a really interesting aroma, this one, but yeah, as I say, on top of that fruitiness, you do get that sharp, almost slightly vinous white wine vinous quality from the fact that it's a wild ale coming into this beer too. Yeah, aroma wise, this is quite unusual and quite different to other things that I've had. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to ponder over the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it. So yeah, I think it's about time that we try this one. So this one is the Fumaça number 9 in the spontaneous series from Cervejaria from Cervejaria Zalaz in Minas Gerais, Paraisópolis, if I remember the town correctly, in Brazil. This should be quite nice. Slange, Skol, cheers, or as they say in Brazilian Portuguese, felicidades. Let's see what this has in store for us. Ooh. Now, that is really nice. I will say straight away, you can see with this one, and I did kind of suspect it when I saw the colour of the beer, the smokiness is a sort of subtlety, and it comes out more and more in the aftertaste. This one, on top of that, it is more of it really does lean more toward that kind of farmhousey saison sort of thing. It's actually got a good little bit of juiciness to it as well. It's very well smooth and rounded, and then yeah, in the aftertaste you get the smoky side of the beer. So I mean, I really like how that goes together. Yeah, flavour wise, this is nice. As I say, big thumbs up to Zalaz from me for this one. Yeah, this is very, very good. Um, this is one, my colleague Alan at the Bishop's Arms, he loves the sort of farmhousey sour ales, and this is one that he told me that he knows that I like smoke beers, and this is one that he told me I should try. So yeah, this is very, very good. So Alan, thank you for the recommendation. I actually can't remember where I bought this one. I really can't. But yeah, this was a very, very good This is a very, very nice beer, and as I say, the smokiness builds into the aftertaste. But let's try and break this down for you and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So, middle third of your palate. The backbone of the beer, you absolutely get a little bit of that woody barrel sort of thing to this one. And I would point out that the woody character has a bit of dryness in this. It doesn't seem familiar, but you know, there are many species of trees and things like that in Brazil that we do not have here in Europe. So potentially it's a wood variety that I haven't come across before. And you know, that's a very exciting thing when it comes to the Brazilian beer scene, you know, and they've got all these fruits and woods and all this sort of thing that they can play with that we do not have up here. But yeah, the backbone of that middle third of your palate in this beer is really very, very nice. The smooth woody backbone there. On top of that, you get straight away that kind of fresh white bread crust, and then you can feel the few different layers of bread. So you've got that white bread, well, no, you've actually got a little bit of brown bread, like a bit of a wholemeal brown bready sort of thing to this one. Then on top of that, I would point out as well that the brown bread comes across as quite dense, but at the same time quite smooth. Then you've got the nice white bread from the barley malt, and you can feel like a slightly denser wheaty layer sitting on top of that. Now, for me, what's interesting about this is that the smoky malts really sit in. They're kind of embedded into that whole bready layer that the beer has. So yeah, the bready layer that this beer has really, it has a nice kind of it really has a nice sort of embedded smokiness to it. And as I say, that flavour becomes a lot more apparent the further into the aftertaste. The further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, you can feel there's a little touch of an ashiness to this one. You can feel that little bit of ashiness in the smokiness, and that comes out. You can just feel that sitting there in the middle of your palate the further into the aftertaste you go. But behind the ashiness, I think sits a bit further forward on the palate. But then you get the kind of almost slightly meatiness to it as well, which sits a bit further back. And then on top of the slightly meaty character that the smokiness gives you, and the meatiness, of course, is kind of similar to the German Rauch malts. You start to get some of the grassiness out of the beer. But like I say, this is all embedded in the bready character, hence the slip of the tongue there. So yeah, it's embedded. The smokiness is embedded in the bready character with this one for me. So yeah, the malty side of this beer, I think, is really, really nice. And on top, I would say that on top of the wheaty layer, you do get a little element down the middle line of your tongue. There's a wee touch of a more, there's a little touch of a more biscuity note to this one. Like down the middle line of your tongue, you do just get a little hint of like a very slightly McVitie's digestive biscuity note. There's just a very, very slight sweetness sitting on top of all of that there, but again, it works. So back third of the palate with this one, you've got the border region between middle and back third of your palate. It builds up a little bit. You do get a little bit of that bready build up there, but then yeah, the back third of the palate I think is quite nice with this one. So you can feel that the base of that back third of the palate, the woody character, just gets that little bit drier. And again, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate, whereas the sweeter flavours come out further forward. We've said that many times on the channel. So yeah, woodiness is a bit drier. You get a little bit of the bread crust in there, which again is a wee bit drier, and you can feel the brown bready layer is a bit taller, the white bready layer is a bit taller, and then the wheat just sits on top of that. And the wheat almost does have a little bit of a slight bitiness to it for sure, but you can feel the smoky character pushing its way into the bread that marks that border region between middle and back third of the palate. And yeah, as I say, I quite like how that pieces together in this beer. So on the On top of that wheaty layer, you start to get some of the more yeasty kind of notes out of the beer, and you can feel it's that more airy, white bready character that's coming out of this one. And again, that's quite nice. It's just a more airy, bready note. There's a little touch of woodiness to the bread, but certainly on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. It is certainly taller. Then as you move into the middle third of the palate, the flavour just squashes together that little bit more, and I like that. And as I say, the smokiness comes out the further into the aftertaste you go, and there's a wee bit of sweetness in there. So yeah, pretty awesome. But on the hoppy side of things then, I think we should move to that. The hoppy side of the beer is quite interesting. But so, back corners of the palate, you can feel, and I wouldn't say this beer isn't too hoppy, actually. It really isn't. But I think there have been some hops added into this one, and quite often what they do with wild ales and sour beers and stuff is they'll add old hops to them so that it doesn't, so that some of the the alpha acid potency is lost, and so it doesn't detract too much from the sourness. We need to note that with this beer too. But yeah, back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness in there, and as you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal character, but that gradually transitions to be more floral and bright the further forward you come. And then yeah, on the front corners of the palate, you've got that nice bright floral aromaticity to the beer, which I think is very, very nice. But round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of grassiness in there, and as I say, a little touch of zestiness, which I think works very, very well. And yeah, again, that gets a big thumbs up from me. The hoppy side of this beer is quite nice, but the hoppy part of the beer is quite wet in a sense. So yeah, it fits in with the sour side of the beer too, the wild side, if we can call it that. But let's focus on the front third of the palate, the fruitiness and that wild component of the beer. So, border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, there's a little bit of a bready build up in this one. And you can feel some of the smoky character, the slightly more ashy smoky character in there as well. But the base of the front third of the palate is more smooth and bready, as we say. Then on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. But on top of that, you get the kind of more sour impact of the beer. And like I say, this beer has a bit of a vinous quality to it, like a white wine vinous quality. So yeah, on the hoppy side of the beer, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a bit of a lemony sort of citrus. There's a bit of a stronger citrus there. And then underneath that, you'll start to get a wee touch of like a sort of sultana-y note. As you move further forward, it becomes a little bit more peary, and at the front edge of the tongue, it's a bit more kind of fresh green apple-like. But as I say, on top of that, when the sour impact comes in, it is like a really white wine vinous type quality that you'll get from this one. So yeah, you really get that nice kind of white wine vinous quality in there. When it comes in, it has a wee bit of an impact to it. It's not puckering, but you do certainly get that kind of wild ale quality to it. But then it just kind of spreads out and mellows out, and goes further back on the tongue. And as I've always said, for me, a good farmhouse ale, sour beer, wild ale, whatever we're going to call them, the way that these flavours, when it comes to the more kind of old school ones like this, for me, it's more about how the flavour mellows out rather than anything else. Which that's what really interests me with these beers. So yeah, I think it goes together really nicely for sure. Yeah, on the I think that's everything we need to say when it comes to the flavour. So yeah, I think on the flavour part of the video we're done. So we can round off with the mouthfeel. For me, mouthfeel is mid-bodied. Carbonation is very smooth. It actually has a little bit of a wetness and cleanliness to it. Brazil obviously is a huge country. There'll be different water profiles all over the place. This beer is in what was it, the Matanique mountain range. So the water quality there will be very, very good, I'm sure. And you can taste the sort of cleanliness in the water there. So that's an interesting point to make about this one. It does feel very, very clean, very, very smooth. And yeah, this beer develops a really nice kind of dryness and smoothness the further into the aftertaste you go. The smoke really comes out into the aftertaste. But yeah, IBU wise, I think this is maybe about 20, 25 IBUs or something, if that. The sour side of the beer, the kind of wild ale type thing, is really, it really mellows out very nicely, this one. But this is quite, in some ways, this beer is really quite bright and quite zesty, so you need to take that into account too. But the malt base is really nice and smooth. It's just a really interesting beer, this one. I haven't tried anything like this on the channel before, as far as memory goes. So this is one of these beers where you just need to try it and see what you think. But I'm certainly impressed with it, and I like the way that the smoky character just builds into the aftertaste. So yeah, a big thumbs up to Cervejaria Zalaz for this one, and I look forward to trying a few more of their beers at some point in the future, and certainly nice to introduce them here on the channel too. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this was the Fumaça, the spontaneous number 9 in the spontaneous series from Cervejaria Zalaz in I forget the name of the town now, but yeah, the southern part of Minas Gerais. Let me just I can tell you, I'll put my pin into my computer so I can see my brewery notes again. Yeah, this one comes to you from Paraisópolis in Fazenda Terezinha in the Mantiqueira mountain range in the southern part of Minas Gerais in Brazil. Really nice to have this one on the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed my take on it. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from these guys as well. I do have another one sitting in my cellar that I'm going to review fairly soon, and that's quite different to this, I have to say. But yeah, give me some other Brazilian brewery recommendations. Some particular beers as well would be interesting. But yeah, introducing the Brazilian beers to you here on the channel has been really, really fun, and I hope we can get down to Brazil and do some out and about videos for sure. That would be awesome. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Cervejaria Zalaz social media, and I'll catch you guys in the next video sometime soon. Slange it, skull, cheers, felicidades.